just east of Kansas City on I-70. If you're more familiar with Blue Springs, we're right next to Blue Springs. But we attend the 39th Street congregation down there, and have been for probably about the past, I think about 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years. Um, I start off by just saying it's been interesting these past since about last fall, because up to last fall I do not remember the last time that I had really gone on I-35 north of Kansas City. Normally it was going to the airport up 29. That's about as far north as we went. Every now and then may venture to St. Joe, and that's when we got lost. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't make it too far north. And since last fall, I have spoken about 5 times, I believe, 4 or 5 times at Davis City, Iowa. So I've been there. Then somehow Trenton got wind of my name, and so I have spoken twice at Trenton the past 2 months, and will be again in August there, back in Davis City in August as well. I did not realize that Davis City had said, hey, they thought that they said on the third Sunday, can you just come up until our preacher gets better? I did not understand that, because after telling Caleb that I would come up here this week, on Monday I got a text from an individual, Terry, up in Davis City, that said, see you Sunday. And I said, no, you won't. I'm like, I'm sorry, I've already spoken for us. So it has been very interesting. I do believe this is the first time I have ever been in the congregation here, so nice to be here and to meet you all. So Caleb told me that I got class this morning and a lesson, so you're in for a treat. Or I'll never be invited back again. So, we'll see on that. Just very briefly, background about myself. I am married. My wife was going to try to come up today, but a 4-hour drive round trip is kind of a long day, and she had some things that she needed to do. And then we have one child, a daughter, that is going to be a senior, and we are not popular enough to hang out with anymore and to go with. So she really has no desire to go anywhere with us too far, unless we're willing to pay. Then surprisingly, she'll be okay with that if lunch is involved. So, but with that, I'll begin this morning here. So it is very challenging, at least to me, to come into a congregation that you've never been to before, and to come up with a class that you only get to do one time. So, I don't know if you've talked about this recently. Maybe you have never talked about this. Maybe you wish you still have never had talked about this if you have not after today. But we are going to talk about a topic that I think you are all familiar with. But I'm going to let you guess. I'm going to give you a scenario, and I'm going to let you to guess to see if you can tell what this topic is today that we're going to talk about. So the scenario is this. One of your children has invited a friend over to play. And as they are playing, you notice commotion, and they are arguing back and forth because your child isn't letting them play with the toys. They are saying, it's my toy. So what might this topic be that we're going to talk about today? Okay, sharing or selfishness. Okay, so sharing or selfishness, because we might respond back to our child, if that was the scenario, and say, well, you have to share your things. And this idea of, or this topic of selfishness. So what does it mean to be selfish? What would you say being selfish is?
Thinking of yourself.
Okay, thinking of yourself.
To be human often, it seems like it's our go-to.
Okay.
We often do it.
Putting yourself above others. You say being human because it seems like that's what our go-to is. And you're right. If we look at society around us and we think about those around us, the most popular person in most people's lives is who? Themselves, right? They are the number one. So Webster's is concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself, seeking or concentrating on one's own advantage, pleasure, or well-being without regard to others, arising from concern with one's own welfare or advantage in disregard of others, lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. So did you notice a word that was repeated a lot of times in that definition? One's. Yeah, one's, right? Your own. Thinking about and your own. So this isn't really a problem in society today, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. But as we start off here, let's go through, and I like kind of two-way because you don't want to hear me talk the entire time. I wouldn't want to hear me talk the entire time. So what are some ways, can you guys think of some ways and shout out ways that we can be selfish with? What are some things, whether they be physical things, we're not really talking about the spiritual too much right now, but what are some ways that we can be selfish, or some things we can be selfish?
Our time, our talents.
Okay, our time, our talents. What about that green stuff that we carry around in our wallet, right? Our money. What else? Our jobs. What about things like a relationship that we have with our wives and our kids? What are we supposed to do to them, or what do we typically do to them? Okay. Well, the feeling that we have is love. We can be selfish with our love, right? Kind of going back to our talents, we can be selfish with what we're willing to put forth the effort to do, right? Because a lot of times what I mean by that is what? If there's something that you want to do, are you going to put forth the effort? Yeah, you are, aren't you? But if there's something that really just isn't quite, not real interested in this, how much effort are you going to put forth to it? Not a lot, right? If any. Not a lot, if any. What about the gospel? Sometimes can we be selfish with the gospel? We can, right? We can be selfish with it. When we also think about selfish, kind of going back a little bit to the child not wanting to share, but when we're selfish, whose way do we want to get? We want our own way, right? So we want our own way. And really, that's, when we think about that, that's a lot of what the world wants today is they want it their way. They don't want to do what anybody else wants them to do. Rules, I don't care about rules. I'm not interested in rules, right? I want to do what I want to do. So what are some characteristics of those who are selfish? Can you look at someone and can you say, this is a selfish person? It's okay. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings if you say,
Most of the children on the school bus.
okay, most of the children are on a school bus. Boy, if you drive a school bus, I also didn't share that I work for a school district, so I understand what you go through on that. So, but when you see that, what are some things? What do they display, or how do they act, or talk that makes you know that they are selfish? I. Okay, you hear I all the time, right? It is all about them. It's all about me. There's never a we or there's never a you. It's all about I. So they're always talking about themselves. In conversations with people, have you ever had a conversation with someone and the conversation tends to always be about who? Them, right? Always about them. And they do anything possible to make everything about them. You may be having a tough time and trying to explain to somebody, oh man, I've had a rough week, it's been terrible. And then what do? They follow up with, well, you thought your week was bad, just listen to mine. They're going to, really? You want to one-up somebody on how bad your week was? But that's what they want to do. Someone who is selfish will do that. If in conversation with them, people who are selfish, they always appear to have the best of everything. I mean, it's always, if you got a car, well, I got the best car. Well, I got the best. It doesn't matter if they really do or not. They're going to talk it up and they're going to act like that they have the best of everything. A topic that you may not be familiar about, they're what? They're experts on it. They're experts on everything, it seems to be. But those are some characteristics of those who are selfish. Well, we hear and I know that, I know that I'm thinking about individuals as I'm talking about this and that are fitting these definitions, and you probably are doing the same. But what does the Bible say about selfishness? Does the Bible say that is exactly, you are the only one that you need to be thinking about? You don't need to be thinking about anybody else. It's all about you. No, the Bible doesn't say that, does it? So we are going to look at some verses here and see what does the Bible say about selfishness. First verse we're going to look at is in Acts chapter 20, verse 35. So if you can turn over to Acts chapter 20, verse 35. It says, I have showed you all things, how that so laboring ye ought to support the weak, and to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. More blessed to give than to receive. Now, you think about, we've mentioned society today. Is that the thinking of mainstream society today, that is more blessed to give than receive? No, it isn't, right? Oh, we'll give, when there's fires in California and there's some natural disaster, and they're constantly saying, hey, well, we need help. So what? We'll give for those situations, right? We'll give maybe if a need arises or if somebody kind of guilts us into giving. We'll give. But typically, instead of giving, it's what am I owed? You owe me. Society owes me. Everybody owes me. The United States is the most owed people known to man. If you talk to them, you're owed everything. So most do not like to give, they would rather receive. But the Bible clearly states there that that is not the attitude. Have you ever given something, have any of you ever given something to someone and it's made a difference in their life? Where you can just see when you give it to them, you can see the thankfulness, the appreciation, and if it's a need, that you're fulfilling a need. How did you feel? Feels good, right? And not so much that you felt good, well, whew, look at me, and now.
That you mentioned, it mentions the weak. So it doesn't just mean anybody. It says we're more like people that cannot work or in real need.
Sure. And we're going to see other verses that clearly point that out, that there are those who are in need, and we need to take care of them. And
people use that more blessed to give than to receive, just in very generic.
Sure. Yeah, no, giving to somebody who's got the $1 million houses, that's really kind of interesting, Well, what are you giving to them? But yeah, no, we're going to see there are other verses here that show, there are those who need, who have a need. All right, so the next series of verses we're going to look at is found in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5 through 11. And I know when you read this, you're going to be like, what in the world does this have to do with selfishness? But hopefully we can tie it in. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5 through 11. It says, and beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. For if these things be in you and abound, they make that you shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But he that lacketh these things is blind, and cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. Wherefore, the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, ye shall never fail. For so an entrance shall be ministered unto you abundantly into that everlasting kingdom of your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So sometimes I tell people what goes in my head is just weird. Nobody wants to be in here. But if you look at this and you read these verses and you see these things that it says we're to be adding, how does this, or is there any tie to this to being selfish and our being selfish?
Well, if you look at what the Lord did to have this ability to be saved, and you're not doing everything you can to better yourself to be more like Him, then you are
Okay.
And so, how can we not reciprocate?
Sure. And that's exactly it. You see what Jesus was willing to do, what he was willing to give. He basically, and I believe we're gonna see here. Sorry, it's been a minute, but he was the example of humility, right? He was the definition, if you would, to be able to go look at humility. But we see in this, like you said, we should be willing to do everything possible to grow. And that's what this verse is saying. These whole verses here are saying you need to continue to grow. You need to add, you need to add, you need to add. You need to always grow these things. Well, for us to add these things that the verse describes here, what is that going to take from us? It's going to take effort, right? It's going to take effort. It's going to take work. And whenever things take work and takes effort, what do they also take? It was mentioned, I believe you mentioned it this morning. What are the things we can be selfish with? Time. It takes time, right? When you think about the time, those who have a job that work all week long, you have 2 days in the weekend, right? And a lot of times the 2 days in the weekend are what? Well, this is my time. This is the time I have to kind of do what I need to do. Because most of the week, I don't get to do what I want to do. I get to do I do my job, whether or not you like it or not. So the weekend is kind of our time. So when you have the time that comes up and you have the downtime, if we would, how do we spend it? Do we always spend it doing whatever we want? Or, mowing, yeah. Man, if that's what you want, then boy, more power to you. No. But even that's a good example. There are a lot of people that don't like mowing. Some people do because they just get to shut down and just kind of relax and stare at nothing and think about nothing. But there are things that we do to maintain our house. And that
And also, when you're on your job, you have chances to talk to people, you have chances to do things there that you can grow also. There's things that come up on your work that you have chances to do.
Sure, absolutely. We have chances all the time. It goes back to, do we take the time and do we take the effort to do it? That's kind of the point of this, is too many times those who are selfish, they don't want to put forth any effort because it may not be what they want to do. They don't want to put forth the time, again, because it's taken time, the time that it takes to put forth this effort and to grow in these areas, it means less time for you, less time for the things that you might want to do. So that was kind of the point on this, and the selfishness is, the Bible says there are things that we need to grow and we need to do, and it's going to take effort and time, and we're going to have to put forth that effort and time and not be selfish with it all the time. The next verse we're going to look at is Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. And this idea was brought up already. It says, "For I say, through the grace given to me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith." So here we have an example of one who has selfish pride. He's basically saying, I'm better than you. Look at me. And we don't know anybody who ever does that, right? And the thing of it is there can be those who do things, even outside of the church. You got your neighbor. Look at me. We've got a neighbor, and he doesn't do it for this reason. But I was joking with him yesterday. We got a neighbor whose yard looks like carpet, and I jokingly told the guy he had one of those curved landscapings installed. And as the guy that installed it walked off, I said, I think he goes out there and hairsprays all the grass just so it stands straight up. But it is an immaculate yard, but there are some that's their attitude is, mine is going to be so much better than you because I'm better than you at this. In a lot of different aspects. But if we're not careful, even when we get into Christianity, we can have that same type of mindset. And what I mean by that is we can have that selfish pride and that selfish mindset that says, look at me, I am doing all this work for God. I'm doing all of this, God. I am sacrificing so much to you. It is just unbelievable the things that I'm willing to do for you, God. You know, look at how I live. And I mean, it is just, it's great. It's amazing. And really at that point, we're kind of saying, God, you're lucky because I'm doing all this stuff. Look over, if you would, turn over the parable. We're not going to read the whole thing. The parable in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 21. Luke 12, 16 through 21, we've got the parable there of that certain rich man whose ground brought forth a lot of basically, it was plentiful. He had a great crop. And we see, let's count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times in this parable, the man refers to himself as I and says, look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. Look how good I am. Basically is what he's saying is, look at all this good stuff I've done and that I have. But what was the reply of God in verse 20? But God said unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall these things be, which thou hast provided? Or which thou hast provided. So he that layeth up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. Saying, you think that you've done all these things, you've gained all these things, and you're so good. He says, in fact, you're forgetting the one who's got them for you. And I didn't pull the verse up here, but you know, there's the verse that says, and this is paraphrasing, that basically says, if we've done everything that God has instructed us to do, we have done that which is our duty. There's no selfish pride in to say that, well, God, look, I've done all this. God's going to say, you're my servant and you've done everything I instructed you to do. Don't think of yourself any better than that. You've done what is expected of you. So there's that idea of selfish pride. Then we have, does this go to 45 after? Nobody ever told me that. Okay, just making sure. I was making an assumption, but I didn't want to make the wrong assumption. The next verse we're going to look at is Romans chapter 12, verse 10. Romans chapter 12, verse 10.
Something I was thinking when you were talking about, and I always say it wrong, it's like a plank in the eye. You know, we probably think we're not too selfish, but when we really focus and look at our lives, we probably think, oh,
Sure.
there's places we could improve.
Sure. And there are times, I don't like, I'm just going to tell you, I don't like using myself as an example. I don't. I do not at all. But I can tell you that back in the fall, whenever Michael Richardson reached out to one of the elders, if he knew anybody that could come up and give a lesson and, you know, could preach and fill in for a while, I would just tell you, he asked me and I never replied. I was like, you know what? I told my wife, I'm like, that is 2 hours one way, 4 hours round trip. That's a lot. You know, that's a long day. And then Michael called me. And you know what? I literally could think of no other excuse that I had to not go up there and to do that, except for I just didn't want to put forth the time. And at that point, I'm thinking, that's not a very good attitude. If I can go up and can help and can do that, I literally have no good excuse not to do it. So, like you said, pointing right at you at that point. And so I said, sure. But again, a lot of times, when we live in the world, and it influences us. And we see how others act, and sometimes, again, we find ourselves being really kind of the center, whether we want to or not, we really kind of see ourselves the center of our world, which we need to make sure that's something we constantly need to fight against on that. But Romans chapter 12, verse 10 says, be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, honoring, preferring one another. The ESV changes that honoring a little bit, and it says outdo one another, basically meaning in showing honor. So we should be preferring others more than ourselves. We should be putting others before us. That's hard to do sometimes. That is hard to do one side because, you know, whenever we, again, that is just not what we see. One area that we can see plays a big role in this is the relationship of the husband and the wife relationship. We read that in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 5 through 7. It says, "For after this manner in old time, the holy women also who trusted in God adorned themselves, being in subjection to their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as you do well and are not afraid with amazement. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, even as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered." So in the husband and wife relationship, we have a really good example of this because of the fact that husbands, you should be looking towards your wife. Wives, you should be looking towards your husband and trying to lift each other up. You know, a lot of times in a marriage relationship, sometimes it's the husband's way, the highway, or no other way. Some of the times where he says, you know what, you do your thing, I'm going to go off and do my thing, and the wives do the same things. They never spend any time together because they're only concerned about themselves. But that looking towards one another and holding them up towards one another and looking at others that way and esteeming them more than you, that can be a challenge. It can be difficult. But that's what the Bible says we should be doing. Matthew chapter 19, verse 21. Matthew 19:21, a very, an example or an account that I'm sure every single one of us know. And it's that account of that man who comes to Jesus and asks him, what should he do or what can he do, should do to be perfect and to receive heaven. Jesus tells him what to do, and then he says, well, I've done all of that. And he follows up and says, Jesus said to them, if thou wilt be perfect or complete, go and sell that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow after me. Give it all to the poor. You've got so much, give it all. This man, it was not saying in any of this, does it mean that we have to give everything to the poor? It was directed to this man. Why? Because Jesus knew he had a problem with that. He knew that he did not want to get rid of that, and it was going to be very difficult for that man to be able to do that. And we see that he failed in that. Because what? He went away sorrowful. But we don't necessarily have to do that today, but we do see that in the Old Testament, they did. In Acts chapter 2, verse 45, on the day of Pentecost, those who stayed longer so that they could learn more and could worship and fellowship with other Christians as they had just become Christians. It says in Acts chapter 2, verse 45, and sold their possessions and goods and parted them unto all men as everyone had need. So as those were there that had stayed longer than they had anticipated, the brethren there said, hey, we're gonna provide for you. We're going to make it to where you can stay as long as you need to, because this great thing had just happened. The church had just been established. There's a lot of learning, a lot of things that need to be going on at this time. And they said, we will provide for you. Do we have that type of attitude? Do we have that willingness that if something was to come up, someone was in need, whether it be here in the congregation or anywhere else, that we would say, you know what? We'll do whatever we can to provide that need. Now, that's not to say that we're going to be able to, take over somebody's house payment for, every month. But we can do what we are able to do. And sometimes when we do that, that means sacrifice. It means sacrificing things that maybe we want. Luke chapter 6, verse 30. Again says to every man that asketh of thee, give to every man that asketh of thee, and of him that taketh away thy goods, ask them not again. And as you would that all men should do unto you, do also unto them likewise. So it says, give to him that asketh. Now, does that mean that if I walk up to you afterwards and say, hey, I need $50, that you have to reach into your billfold and give me $50? I mean, if you're okay with that. No, I'm just kidding. No, it doesn't, right? But again, as someone has need, we need to make sure that we are doing what we can for them. So because of time, we're going to skip. You don't really have any clue what I have in my notes, but we're going to skip down to my notes a little bit. We're going to look now at Galatians chapter 2, verse 20 to get into this self-sacrificing time here. So Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. It says, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So we talked about that before. What was Christ willing to do for each and every one of us? Sacrifice his life. He gave himself for us. He gave himself for us. What does he ask us to do in return? Give ourselves back, right? Give ourselves back. Paul here says what? He says, I am no longer my own, but I am yours. Is that a pretty big sacrifice? Absolutely it is, right? It is a pretty big sacrifice. Because when we think about our lives, even though we want to live as Christians, we want to do what the Bible says, sometimes we want to do what? What we want. We want to do what we want to do. We want to do what makes us happy. 90% of the time, I do what God wants. Isn't that enough? No. It's not. It isn't enough. We need to completely, fully give ourselves to Christ and to God. Our lives are no longer ours. And that is a very hard thing to swallow sometimes. That it is no longer ours. All right, let's quickly look at some examples here. We'll finish up looking at some examples in the Bible of those who were selfish. So we look here, and one of the ones that first came to my mind was Lot. So in Genesis chapter 13, verse 8 through 12, we see Abraham and Lot, what? They have so much stuff between the two of them that they can no longer be together. So what does Abraham do? What's the solution to this?
Then he let Lot choose first.
Okay. He basically told Lot, you can choose, right? You can choose the land. Look out in the land. You choose where you go, and I will go somewhere else. Now, with Lot choosing the land, does that make him selfish? Just in the not the land that he chose, but just Lot being given the first choice and picking a spot, does that make him selfish? No, because what? Abraham told him, you can pick. So there was nothing wrong with Lot saying, okay, I will take this area, because Abraham said, you choose, and we'll go elsewhere. So where does the selfishness play into this? Prime land. But even then, Abraham said you can choose. So he took the prime land, but what was wrong, or what was maybe questionable about that prime land that he chose? Do what? The cities on it, where they were located, right? This prime land, he says, wow, I see this. This looks great. I mean, this is amazing land. This is going to take care of all of our cattle. This is going to take care of all of us. It is a wonderful land. I'm just going to overlook the fact that the cities that are there are extremely wicked. I mean, extremely wicked. But it doesn't matter, because that selfish pride that comes into play a little bit that says, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter. We are so faithful and obedient to God that we can go into that land. We're not going to get sucked into the cities. We're not going to get sucked into all of the sinful things that they're doing. We can withstand. So he chooses that land. He goes over there with his family and all of his servants. And what do we know happens? How many of his family and servants does he end up with besides himself? Two daughters. So all of that great wealth, all of the stuff that he had, he ends up with his 2 daughters. He does not even end up with his wife. And at some sense, that is that selfish pride where he says, I'm going to choose this land. It is the good, fertile land, but it's tucked right in with all the sinfulness. What about Achan? Joshua chapter 7, verse 1 through 25. So again, we're not going to read all this, but do you remember what Achan did? If you don't remember, I'll catch you up here. Whenever the children of Israel went in to the land of Canaan against Jericho, what did God instruct them to do? Take nothing. Don't take anything. But what did, and we see that in chapter 6, verse 17 and 18. Basically, you can't take anything. Only thing you're going to do is save Rahab the harlot. She shall live, and all that's with her in her house. But you don't take anything else. What does Achan do? He takes stuff. He takes stuff. He goes back. He buries it and puts it under his tent. What happens to Israel? What's the result of that? Yep, the next battle when Israel, they go in and they take Jericho, a walled city that they had no, literally, if you were to put Israel against that city, 9 times out of 10, they're going to lose. The only time they're going to win is when God's on their side. They go in and they're victorious. And if I remember right, so somebody can correct me, I don't believe they lost anyone in that battle either. But they go to Ai, which is a much different city, smaller city. Should have been just easy for them to overtake. They go in, they lose, and they lose 36 lives. All because of what? Achan's selfishness. He saw the thing that he desired, even though God said, don't take it. He wanted it. He took it. And the rest of Israel were punished for it. Then you think about King Ahab in Naboth's vineyard in 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 1 through 7. If you recall this scenario here, he asks Naboth to sell his vineyard, and what does he do? He refuses. He says, no, I'm not going to sell that. And the reason he refuses is because God told him, don't sell it. Do not sell this land. But Ahab, he really wanted it. So sometimes when you really want something that you can't have, what do?
You try harder.
Okay, you try harder, or even before you try harder, you what? You pout a little, right? You start pouting. Man, I really wanted that, and I can't have it. That's what Ahab did. He pouts. He pouts and complains enough, if you would, that his wife says, don't worry about it. I'll get that for you. I'll take care of it. How does she take care of that and get that vineyard for Ahab? It's the easy solution. It's the solution that so many people today take. If you watch the news, there are a lot of people that take this same and they make the same approach today. If they want something and you have it, how do they get it? Take it. And a lot of times when they take it, what are they going to do to you? Do what? They get rid of you. They're just going to kill you, right? That's what she does. She kills Naboth and takes the family. All because of selfishness of the king. Then you think about the account of the old prophet and the younger prophet in 1 Kings chapter 13, verse 11 through 34. If you recall of that account there, the young prophet had been given instruction by God in verse 9 and basically said, you're going to go, and when you go, do not return the way you came. Just keep, I don't want to say he's in a circle, but don't backtrack, basically, is what God tells him. Don't backtrack. But in verse 11, we see that the old prophet hears of this man, And he really wants to meet him. He really wants to, to sit down and have a meal with him and talk to him. And he finds the man in verse 14, and in verse 15 he says, "Hey, will you come eat with me?" Well, the younger prophet gives him the instructions that God had given him and said, I can't go back. God said, continue on. Basically, don't backtrack. But the old prophet was selfish. He really wanted to meet this guy. He really wanted to talk with him. So what does he do? He tells him something. It's a 3-letter word. What does he tell him? He tells him a lie. He tells him a lie, and he says, nope, God came to me and said, you can come back and you can talk with me and eat with me. What does that young prophet do? He does. He goes back. And what happens to him? He dies. He ends up dying because that old prophet was selfish. We've already mentioned the rich young ruler being selfish. So what about those? We'll get in real quick to some examples, because when I mean real quick, like 20 seconds quick. We also see examples of those who were not selfish. We're going to just kind of jump down. One of them, we'll go ahead and we'll mention Lot, because he was selfish in his decision. But in Genesis chapter 19, verse 1 through 11, we see where he does not, shows that he's really not completely selfish in everything that he does, because he provides shelter and protection for the 2 men, in quotations, or the angels that came to Sodom. So he was willing to protect them and to watch over them. Then we see the example of the widow in Luke chapter 21, verse 2 through 4. What did she do? How did she show her that she was not selfish? She gave all she had, right? Was she instructed to do that? Did she have to do that? No, not at all. But that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to give all that she had, and she did. Then we see the Macedonians in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 through 5. It says that Paul had already talked about it. It says we already mentioned them, but we skipped that section. But we talk about them, and Paul's talked to them that he hoped that he would that they would give financially, but they did so much more than that. They gave of themselves to God first, and then they provided financially. So they were a great example of those who were not selfish. And then finally we see, we're going to just mention here, is Acts chapter 20, verse 28, where it says, Paul there is talking to the elders, and he says, "Take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased from his own blood." An elder cannot be selfish. They're not to be selfish. Because whose flock are they watching over? Is it theirs? No. It's God's, right? It's God's flock. Those are the one that we have, those are his, and it says that he what? Purchased with his own blood. That great sacrifice that Jesus had made for us. So, there's the reflection that we have here as you go through the week. Are you selfish? Or not? Are you selfish in any aspect of your lives? Again, it's easy to say, no, I'm not selfish. I help out as much as I can. I do as much as I can when I can. But we only look at the areas where we are generous in. Is there some areas in our life that maybe we're a little more selfish than we should be? Just think about those things. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
When Jesus prayed to the Father before he was crucified, he did not want to do this. That's not being selfish. None of us want to endure things.
Sure.
He knew what he was going to endure. But what he did do, your will. So we have a desire to do what God's will. It may not be easy for us to go down that road. He wants us to go down sometimes. But we need to be willing to do that.
Sure.
It's not wrong for us not to want to.
Sure.
That's what
Yeah, none of us want to be persecuted, right? None of us have said, "Man, we're persecution. Where do I sign up?" That sounds great. No, we don't want it. We don't want that, right? It's just what we got to be careful of, and like you said, is if there's the opportunity rises up that says, "Here's the deal. You've got a choice to be made. You can either be persecuted, do what God says and be persecuted, or know that if all you have to do is say no, say, I'm going to do something else, what God has instructed, and that persecution goes away." That's the selfish when we say, no, I'm not going to do what God says. I'm going to make it easier on myself. You know, we don't want the persecution. It's not exciting. It doesn't feel good. In the end, I guarantee it's going to. And what I mean, I don't even mean the end, you know, of eternity. It will at that point. All of it will. But even then, once we get through that, when we look back and say, you know what, I endured that, I did what's right, it is going to make us feel better. It really, truly will. You know, we see Paul and all the things that he endured. Again, being shipwrecked, being stoned, all of these things. He didn't enjoy it. But when he looked at the end of his life and he says, it's finished, I've been faithful to the end, here's what is before me, that crown of righteousness, it was all worth it. Every single bit of it was worth it. So, anything else? Well, I appreciate your time and your comments, and hopefully this was beneficial. Again, it's a little challenging just to come up and this guy to get in front of you and just start talking. So, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.